Hey guys, this is Dieter, and I'm here with another build video for you, and today we are doing the Alias Rush 750 RC helicopter. It's a 700 size electric. You can get an extension to run up to 750 millimeter blades. This is just the normal kit with that'll run 690 to 710 millimeter blades, and we're going to take a look at what's in the box for now. So, nice little box here, pretty compact. All the labeling on it. Take a look inside here, see how they've lined this up. Taking a look here, what all is inside. When you open it up, you might find there's a little disc. I'm sure we've got the manual in electronic format here. Inside this disc is what I'm guessing we've got in there. Looks like all the hardware is wrapped up here really nice in this little bag, organized pretty well. We've got a main bag, 3, 5, 6, and 9. All of the hardware, the bearings. It looks like we've got a front torque tube, and it's even got the gears already installed. We'll see how well those are installed here once we take a look at that step. Underneath we've got another set of goodies. There we go, and that's sliding down. So here we've got main bag 1 and 2 and 10 and 11, which has the swash plate, all the head components, the main blade grips. Looks like we've got some stuff for the tail. Again, it looks like all the gears are already installed. Main shaft, feathering shaft. So it looks like there's probably not too much effort that will need to go into the build. Here in this other box we have, we'll open that here in a minute, see what else we've got in this main box. We've got all the frame components here, all sealed up into the same bag. Pretty nice. We'll put that to the side and save that for its respective portion. And in here, this long one we have, looks like boom and boom supports and everything for mounting, all of that stuff, all of the bearings, everything for that support. So we'll put this to the side as well. Get rid of this main box. And in here, looks like we're probably going to have the canopy. Ooh, that's pretty nice and bright. Okay, so we've got the canopy, and it looks like there's also some hardware in this bag. Oh, just the skid stuff. So we've got the skid hardware there inside the canopy. Also, it's like main gear with everything you need there. Mini bag 7. Looks like it's got some hardware, and it looks like the main gear and the tail auto rotation gear are already put together there. We'll make sure we've got thread lock on all that stuff. And here we have the canopy. Alright. Wrapped up, very nice, and it's a really nice canopy overall. Nice and sleek. You can tell looks very similar to the Fusion, which I love. And what else we have in here? All the packaging goodies. A hardware bag. Looks like we've got some linkage rods and some other stuff for the swash plate and canopy grommets. And then these guys are probably, if it's anything like the Fusion, for alignment of the swash plate with the control arms. There's probably some sort of pin we put through the control arms and into the frame. So we'll take a look at that later once we demonstrate it. And last thing we've got here is blade grip. Probably just gotta punch these little things out, and looks like they've even got a cool little design here. Almost looks like a ghost. Alright, so that's what we've got in the box. We'll start with the build here, and move on to step one. Okay, you'll find that the manual is a PDF format that will come on in the disc that you get with it. I've printed this out here so I could do the demonstration, show you what we're going to do here. So starting with assembly 1, the very beginning, we will get the fly barless head set up. Just a couple things to note here. Make sure that we measure the size of the 3x10 versus the 3x8 that go in here. And we want to install these 3x10s first in the side of this head block before we put these ones in. And also, the inner diameter of these bearings are big enough to go around this whole thing, so it may seem when you first put it through here that it's not going to fit, but this is going to go through, so there's plenty of threading to go into this. So don't worry about that. Make sure you use the blue thread lock here and red thread lock here. So we've got both the different thread lock, red, blue. Make sure you pay attention to the color that it recommends there. The 3x10 millimeter screws you'll find are actually stuffed in the head block in here. Button head screws next to it. I've already partially assembled this part. Head block's going to be right here, the button head's right here, and all of the other hardware is going to be here and here. So speaking of which, we've got this put together. We've put these 10mm with blue thread lock in here. These 8mm. Be really careful how much thread lock you put in there, because you don't want it to get in here and gum up these bearings. You'll find that these arms are already pre-assembled here. All of the flange bearings are installed. These bearings are pre-installed, so make sure that you just hold it up the same way as in the picture and you install it with everything in the correct direction. And if you've already got these ball link balls installed, make sure that they're on the right side, because they won't cross after you've got it installed, so you'll have to back it out and change it. So make sure that everything's facing the correct direction. And this is the first part of assembly 1 here. We've put red thread lock in here, and this is that part. So the second part of the assembly here is just to put this main shaft in here, which comes here in the top of this bag. So let's get these out. It'll be wrapped up better. And you'll notice a bit more length on one side than on the other side with the hole. So the shorter side is the one that goes up inside of here, and you're going to want to line it up with the holes. And then you've got this hardware here, which we're going to put on this side, and the side, which you can see is squared out, will be the side where you put the locking nut in there. So we're going to put this main shaft on here and have the end of this assembly 1 finished up, and then we can move on to assembly 2. Okay, still working on assembly 1 here. We've got our button head on, and we've got these little levers right here installed. Again, we're going to make sure that we have them on the correct side before we screw them all the way in, because they won't. They'll interact if you try to switch them, and you'll have to back everything out. Right here, we found that there's a bag with these little pieces of hardware, these 2 black inserts, which go in first. You can see they're kind of longer on one side than they are on the other. So they're going to go in a specific way, so we have to push it in there and kind of twist it around. And then you've got a couple different colors of the dampers. There are some blacker ones. It says here in my version that we've got hard, which are the gray, and medium, which are the white. I think it's hard are the gray, and medium, in my case, are the black ones, which are recommended. I'm going to probably run some higher head speeds just to try to wring this thing out, and so I'm putting the gray ones in there. It's recommended to put the black ones in there it's really up to you and what kind of head speeds you prefer. So we're going to get this in here, twist it around, and then push it in as hard as you can. And then we're going to put the damper in right after that. Same with the other side. You're going to have to twist it around there. Make sure it's pushed in really hard. Put the damper in behind that as well. And one more note also about when you put the main shaft on for this final part of assembly 1, make sure that these arms are on the correct side, so out on each side, because if they're both on the same side, you'll find you'll have to back it out, because again, these little arms or these ball links prevent it from moving freely on either side. So this is part of the whole patented head that Charlie came out with, and so far it looks pretty cool, not like anything I've really seen. And it seems to really make good use of little amount of mechanical components. So it's efficient, but you have to make sure you're installing it correctly, otherwise you're going to have to back stuff out a lot. So this is the end of assembly 1, and so far it's looking pretty solid, looking pretty cool. Another note, you'll find this button head might be a little loose. I used a 10mm, I measured it out with calipers. Something that's very important. Measure every screw with calipers, and also wipe them off with a dry rag to get any oil or grease off of them before you put any of the thread lock on there. So after screwing that in pretty tight, I didn't want to go any tighter. It looks like it's loose, but that makes sense. You know, if you're doing inverted and you're going to do some blade scrapes, it might actually benefit you to have that a little loose. So I'm thinking that's probably actually part of the design as well. So it's got just a little bit of play on both directions, and it can spin around. So, and I'm guessing that's expected. So here's the end of assembly 1. We're going to go and move on here to assembly 2 here in the next minute. Okay, next, now that we have assembly 1 finished up here, we are moving on to assembly 2. It looks like we're going to be pulling out the blade grips, making the ball linkages, pulling out the spindle shaft, getting all of this stuff set up. I'm guessing these bearings are probably pre-installed like all the other bearings have been so far, but I haven't checked it out yet. It looks like all the hardware is here, here, and here. This other stuff, we've got the swash plate and then what looks like for the tail on this part. So we'll pull this stuff out, we'll see what we've got here, and we're going to just make sure we line it up all the same as it is here, like the same order. We've got these 2 spacers which will go in between the blade grips and all the inner bearings and the head block. And we'll also be putting the grips on here. Make sure we measure out the size of the screws that we're using with the calipers every time. And for this head linkage rod, inside looks like it's 25.5 millimeters, and then if you measured from the center holes of the linkages, 59.9 millimeters looks like the end. And we've got thrust bearings here as well. As always, check all the notes on the thrust bearings as it says here. You can see here in the picture there's the open end is going to go towards the center hub. Okay, so the open end will always go towards the center, and we're going to fill it with the lithium grease that we've purchased separately. And then that way when it spins around, that grease won't fly out. Because if you've got the open end on the outside, when you spin it around, that grease just flies out and it doesn't last very long. So we're going to make sure we get everything lined up there. First we'll just pull all these little parts out and we'll show you what we've got. And then we'll move on to more of the details here, and making sure we've got bearing grease and using thread lock where it's recommended. Also, some light oil here on the spindle shaft is also good when it's going through the stock dampers. Okay, more here now with assembly number 2 here, the flybarless head. We've pulled everything out of the box here. The blade grips were in here. Again, some hardware in here, spindle shaft. Those really big M16 by 6 screws, like these big fat ones that are going to end up going into the spindle shaft. Like, these are huge. I don't think that's going to be coming out. So if you're wondering where those are in here. They're not in here with the blade grips. With the blade grips, you'll find that there's the thrust bearings for those, and then there's the hardware. I think these screws are the ones that are going to end up going into the blade grips to hold the blades in, so we'll put these to the side and use them much later on. These other little ones that come in that package are this thrust washer that will come in here. Just make sure you don't confuse it with this other damper spacer. So that might be easy to confuse those. That one goes out here. This one that comes in this package goes in here before the thrust bearings. All of the grips have the bearings pre-installed. So there's this bearing in here and then the 2 bearings on this side that they show here in this picture. So these are already pre-installed. All we're doing is we're going to put the thrust washer and then the thrust bearings and then this washer, which also comes in this package with the big screws, and we're going to make sure that we use red thread lock for that. What I like to do usually is I would use red on one side, blue on the other, so one would break free. I'll see what it recommends here. It looks like red thread lock is what they recommend, so if they say red, go for red. But that might be a pain to get out later, but also it will never come apart on you. So I've usually been successful with one red and one blue, but these are also pretty big, so it might be a different story altogether. The blade grip arms and the ball links that go on the end of them are all in there. Make sure you're using the correct sizes. Both of these that hold it in are the 3x8, and all the screws pretty much come together in perfect packages. We've got these ball links, or these linkage rods. So again, we're going to measure those to size. We're going to pull out the grease, we're going to pull out the oil, we're going to get this stuff all put together, and if we have any notes, we will let you know along the way. Alright, now we've got the bearings here, and what I've got now is a Superlube, the Synthium grease, or synthetic grease, made with silicone. So I'm going to just generously apply it inside this guy and spread it all throughout the inside. Just make sure you get it all over inside there. I know it sounds dirty, huh? But it's not. But the grease will be dirty someday, so be sure to replace it after 100 flights or so. 'Cause it's always good to have nice, smooth thrust bearings. So get it all in there, and also put it on this side, on both sides. Once we get those nice and packed, we're going to also try to figure out which one's the inner and which one's the outer diameter for these guys. Usually you put 2 of them on. See, that one's tight, so I'm guessing that's the outer diameter. The tighter one is the outer diameter. The one that's loose, like that, is the inner diameter. So this one's going to go in, and then we're going to have the thrust bearing facing inside with all the grease packed into it. That's the order that we're going to have it. And then the outer diameter of the race bearing. But also, again, make sure you get these little washers in there first. So we were just showing you there how to do the thrust bearings. Now we're going to lay everything out like it is in the manual. So that's what I like to do, is just put the grip there. And then after the grip is a little check here. Pull this guy out. We now have these little washer bearings out, so put that in, inner diameter, thrust bearing, outer diameter. We got this hardware, and we'll have this washer, and then this screw. And I'm also going to make sure I've got all the thread lock that I need. Looks like we're going to need red, so we'll do that. We're going to clean these off, make sure we get all the grease off this, and then we're just going to throw those on there in the correct order through the spindle shaft. So we'll get that one in there. Spindle shaft inside the grip. I have a little bit more loading of grease in here, but then we're just going to push this shaft through. We'll put all of these in order, like it says here in the manual, right here, and then we'll have one side, and then we can put that through the head block, and then we'll run all of those parts in the same order on the other side, and then we'll tighten both of those ends, and then we'll put these arms on. So we're going to do that right now. Pack this with grease. We'll show you after this one's done, and we'll slide it into the other one and get that set to go. Alright, moving on a little further here with the flybarless head. We've got this part all set. You may be able to see in there, there's the golden thrust washer inside there. It didn't want to come out when I pounded it through. But then we've got the larger diameter inside here, the thrust bearing with the open face towards the inside, and then the smaller diameter thrust bearing, or thrust washer. And then the end here we've got this washer, which doesn't go over. It actually just holds this screw against this stuff. So it's kind of nice, you know, it doesn't slip right over the top, so you don't have to deal with making sure it's got enough distance. So hopefully less locking up when you do that. So we've got that through, and it recommends to put some oil. I've got some of my good old Scorpion oil here. All sorts of stuff will work. It says to oil these up, and then we're going to make sure we've got these guys in here in between. So from there, the kit, they also provide these huge, I think what, 6mm hex screws. They're huge. They provide 2 of them so you can get the torque going on both sides. So you can use that to just push that in here and then give you a little more control of the spindle. Make sure you've got this little damper spacer in there, and then we're going to pull out our assembly 1 that we've got here, and make sure we push this through. We're just going to give it a little bit more oil on the end here for pushing it through. I want to make sure everything's nice and smooth and nothing gets knocked out of place. We want to make sure that these dampers are nice in here. It looks like it's, you know, a pretty tight fit after a couple flights. It might take a couple flights for these to work in, so it might be a little bit tight here at the first couple flights, but with the force pulling outside, you might find that goes away actually during flight. Got that, and when we've got this pushed in all the way, what I like to do is grab something and make sure I can push the damper down nice and tight, just so it's embedded in there the way it should. Smooth that around, we don't want to break anything, but now that's still nice and level there. And then we're going to grab this end, and then we're going to go with the other grip, and then the same way we did everything here the first time, we're going to make sure we line everything up. We've got our thrust bearings, I still need to load that, and then we've got the hardware. I've got this part and then this part right here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to thread these how they're supposed to go on the end of the hex driver and then put them over, get the thread lock on there, and then start screwing that, and then we'll tighten, torque both ends, and then after that we'll show you what we've got left. It'll just be these blade grip arms after that. Alright, now for just a closer demonstration of what I'm going to be doing to get these parts on there, we basically just lined them up. Again, we've got this thrust washer, larger inner diameter, the thrust bearings with the open face going towards the inside, lower diameter, or smaller diameter, and then we're just going to put this here and let it slide through. And then we're going to push that out, and you should see it's about level right there, as mine is. There we go. Better angle. So this is nice and level. Once we push that in. And then so next we'll be putting this on the end of the other hex wrench with the washer on the end, and then hold one hex wrench on one side and then one on the other. We're going to screw this in and then torque both of them together. And then we're going to get those nice and tight, and hopefully there will still be plenty of play in these blade grips. Okay, and here we are almost done with assembly 2. We still just need to put the blade grip arms on, but we're just showing here we've got those torqued really good. We got those on there. These move nice and free. You know, they're all pretty good. Just a little bit, you know, you can feel, even if you pull on this, you'll have it even more loose. So this should be pretty good, and those bearings should have been nice and level with the spindle shaft when you put those last screws in there. I've put these screws in here, screw and bolt, that are going to hold the blades in just in place just for now so I don't lose them, and this is almost ready to go. This is nice and loose. We're going to now get these 3x8mm, put them in blue thread lock, put the blade grip arms in like this, and on the ends we're going to put those little linkage balls, and it recommends using red thread lock, so red thread lock on those linkage balls that are in there. And make sure you get all the oil off of these, because this bag particular was actually pretty oily, or it looks pretty oily, so let's make sure we clean those off, blue thread lock in there, then we'll get those arms on, and we'll have assembly 2 just about finished. Alright, one more quick thing to note here about the damper spacer. Make sure that the tapered edge is towards the damper. The tapered edge it's going to kind of taper down a little bit, so there's going to be kind of a wider side of that little washer, and then a shorter side. Then the shorter side goes in towards the damper. So on a microscopic level towards here, that little washer that's in here is just going to kind of slope down this way. Bigger side towards the grip. Okay, now a note for when we're installing these blade grip arms. It may look like you can just kind of put it on there. In some cases you can. It looks like what worked best for me was when I made sure I slide it on there and then line those holes up, use the thread lock, and then get that in there. And that way you're not pushing against any flashing that might be in here. Didn't seem like there was any really, but it looks like it's best just slid on here, and it also stops here at the end when it lines up. So do that to make sure these are flush, and also screw in the screws. Don't tighten one too much and then start the other one. Just get it, you know, just a little tight, and then get the other one nice and tight, and then start screwing them both in back and forth really tight. So we'll get those together, and then all we have to do is put the ball links on the end of these, and we'll be about done with assembly 2. Right, here we are just finishing up assembly 2. We've got these ball links on. Make sure this is going to be rotating clockwise. It's going to be leading edge, so that these blade grips are on the right side. If you got them trailing edge, you're going to have to back those out. Swap these. Looks like they'll go over the button head, but if you've got both of them installed, then they won't cross. So you'll very least have to take these ball links off. So that's your last chance to swap those if you've got them the wrong direction. And what's really cool, you can notice we've got the little alias symbol here built into the blade grip head. I thought that was pretty cool. We've got this all set and ready to go. Now we're going to measure out these linkage rods. Some tools that I find useful for when you're putting together linkage rods. After you get the initial threading going, it's nice to have a tool like this. You can put those in there. Oh, actually, looks like these are a little too thick. Okay, so since those are too thick, I think we can just use some pliers, just some needle nose pliers, to hold something like that in place. Get the initial threading in there, and then I like to use these ball link pliers to hold those in place as well. You can also maybe put a screwdriver in there and use that to twist it. That's a possibility. You might be putting a little bit of torque on the inside of these and you don't want to mess those up. So, I mean, unless you want to get something like this and carve some of the material away, I think what I'm going to do is, do what I can with my hand and then just use this guy and keep pulling around to get it down to size. It's a little more tedious, but it's just what needs to be done. There's probably some other ways you guys can think of to get that going. And from what I've heard, these grips are a little bit tight, so we're definitely going to need one of these ball link reamers. We put it on there just like a regular ball link, twist it around if it's too tight, and just keep going until we get it to where it's nice and loose on the head right here. One thing we see that's pretty cool, if you line up these ball links, you see that you're going to have your phasing perfectly here at 0 degrees. It's going to be nice and level, where usually you have this going down to the swash plate, and you've got 4 ball links on the inner part of the swash plate, and when you tighten the swash plate it could be off and you could have actually a bit of an angle here, and so your phasing is off. But this makes sure that your phasing is nice and straight. So that's a pretty clever design that he's got built into this. So the swash plate will probably have fewer ball links actually attached to it. So I think that's the patented part of this head design that I don't think we've seen in any other head design before. So it's actually pretty cool. We're going to get these ball links ready. We're going to measure them to size. Again, 25.5 millimeters, measured with a caliper on the inside, and then we'll put those on the head, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. Alright, now I have one of these guys measured out, and now that I've done that, I've got 25.5 basically on the inside diameter here. I will show you what method I used and what worked for me. So using this, we've got the bigger hole and the smaller hole here. I like to put it in the smaller hole just for threading these guys, just to get that initial thread in there. So sometimes you gotta twist it. Make sure you try to get it as straight as you can. Twist it once or twice. Do that on the other side. Just get that initial thread in there. So you might have to push a little bit. So it's the funnest part. So once you've got those initial threads in there, you can clamp this, and I found there's not a lot of resistance at first, so you can actually just stick one of these through here and twist it. That's what I did. Clamp it down nice and tight, and it's not going to give you a lot of resistance until you're pretty far into it and close to the distance that you're aiming for. So we've got the calipers here, and you can always bring it down here, check it,
keep twisting it. So long story short, you just keep doing that. You'll get close to the point here where you're almost there, and when it starts to tighten up, in which case you can take that and then grab another wrench and then tighten it just a few more times, keep comparing it, and make sure that it's up to the distance that you want. So that's another way to get it done, since they don't really fit in this tool here that we use traditionally. But these are some pretty beefy ball links, so I don't think we'll have any problems with them. Okay, and here's the finished product. We've got two ball linkage rods that are exactly the same length. They measure, here we go, 25.5 on the inside, and on the outer diameter they're 59.5 if you were to measure from the center of the ends. Let's see here. So that's close. So each end, about the centers. But you might also find during your setup of your fly barless system or whatever you're using that you might have to mechanically adjust these. Make sure you just adjust both of them. You may have to go out a couple turns or in a couple turns. That's perfectly reasonable. That's expected sometimes. It's not always perfect here, but make sure your mechanical setup is perfectly even, and it's going to be close to these measurements here. So this is a baseline. You're going to want to make sure there's two sides here, and you want to have the two like rounded out clean sides facing the same side, and those are going to be facing the ball links here when you install them. As far as getting them on, just using the ball link pliers doesn't seem to be sufficient. You can actually probably use them. What I've had success with was putting them here and then tightening the ball links and then pushing on the other side. But what really works for me is to take this and then find a corner of a table and then push down with the weight. Basically, also with the reamer tool, is to just get it and then push down on the table. It goes in pretty easily that way. And then once you've got this one on, it's actually pretty easy, once both sides are reamed out pretty well, to get this second one on just with the ball link pliers. So once we've got that, we can line this one up and just snap that one back on there. And then you want to make sure that all of these are moving smooth. So once you've got these nice and set, they should be smooth. Here's the end of this part of assembly 2. Next part, it looks like, is the swash plates, and from what I'm looking at here, it looks like the swash plate is actually already put together for us. So we're going to pull this out, and it looks like everything here, the bearings, it actually moves kind of rough. Looks like it needs some oil in here. So again, we're going to get our Scorpion oil and get that in there. Looks like the only thing we really have to do here is put these balls here. So we're going to make sure we get any grease off the ends of those. Put some, I think what looks like, they call for red thread lock. So red thread lock on the ends of those. And then put those here on the ends of the swash plate. So that's the next step, and we'll put this together and show you what we've got when we're done. Okay, to the swash plate part of assembly 2. Looks like most of the swash plate is already put together. All of these bearings are already installed. All of the spacers, these bearings, the pivot ball, also the swash plate for the upper cup. These cap screws are also installed, and it appears to me like they do have the blue thread lock in there. They're a little tight to break free, but I noticed inside there that, you know, there's, if they put any blue thread lock on there, it was very little, just on the tip of it. So I'm just going to put a little bit more blue thread lock in there, make sure I clean it up so it's not too gunky. And then I'm just going to reinstall these screws here. Get them nice and tight. We want to make sure those are in tight, but this ball is also moving. I'm also going to put a little bit of this grease here on this ball so it moves around a little easier. Work that in there just a little bit. So yeah, now that moves nice and smooth. Only thing we really have to do with this is, like it says down here, install these guys, these ball link ends. It looks like it recommends red for the inside ones and blue for the outside ones. So we're going to use blue thread lock and red. You can probably only just put 2 of these on there. It looks like it says to put all 4 of them on there, and that there's enough linkage balls to put them on there, but I know we're probably just going to be using 2 since the linkage rods actually connect to the mixing arm here instead of the swash plate like it does in most helicopters. So maybe they have those other 2 there just in case these get broken, or to give someone an option for longer linkage rods and a different option for setup. But we're just going to get that set up, put the ball link ends on here, and then we'll come show you what that looks like. Okay, just to show you the finished product here with assembly 2 finished up. These guys are moving nice and smooth. Swash plate is finished. We use red thread lock on these inner ones. I just put the 2 on. You could put all 4 of them on. I'm just going to put these to the side and save them for later in case these get bent or something. And then blue thread lock on the outer ones, and make sure if you choose, you can pull these out and put blue thread lock on there. Looks like they're already factory installed pretty well though. Once you turn it, you can tell it's the thread lock got in any of the bearings. You can actually almost hear the grease inside of it, and make sure that the ball is moving nice and smooth. If it's not, something might be too tight in here and you might have something caught in there. So make sure that all of this is moving nice and smooth. And next we will move on to assembly 3. Looks like we'll be putting together the frame systems. So we'll go find where those are and pull those out and move on to this next step.